What's up, everyone? And thanks again for checking in this week, wherever you may be and however you're listening. I want to thank you for checking in on your favorite podcast app, as we're on iTunes, Libsyn, Google Play, and more. And then a special hello to all of you catching us live on YouTube, as we do every Sunday night. If you've been listening, you know over the past 4 weeks, we've been discussing our positional rankings and potential draft strategies for this upcoming fantasy season. This week, we're going to put our thoughts into action and go through our second annual mock draft right here live in front of you. Those of you live on YouTube, make sure you comment along as we fill in our rosters. Let us know who's nailing it, me, and who's struggling, Rocco. All right, so how this is going to work here. All right, we're jumping into a Yahoo standard 10-team mock draft. Earlier this week, we had a mini lottery amongst the group. We decided to give you all, our listeners, kind of the widest variety that we could. So we're going to be picking 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th to kind of give you a thought of where you may be at either end of the draft or kind of either end of the middle. In our nice little mini lottery, once again, as usual, I lost, but South was our big winner. He's going to pick number 1 overall. Deal is going to be selecting 4th. Rocco coming in at number 7, and I'll make the turn at number 10. The other 6 mockers are random Yahoo users. They have no idea they're about to be a part of something huge, at least until we get into the lobby. We'll let them know. Maybe they'll check us out here. But that being said, we have no idea what we're about to run into, which is kind of the most genuine way we can kind of give you what to expect in your draft. We've been telling you, hey, draft what comes to you. You can't plan. And this is Exhibit A. We cannot plan for what these other owners are going to do. So this is going to kind of give you a nice idea of how you should be reacting, what you should be thinking about as you're drafting. So we've got about 9 to 10 minutes before the draft here really starts. We wanted to kick it around the room. And we planned this out. I think we did our lottery on Tuesday so that the 4 of us knew where we were going to draft. But, most leagues, especially if you're just in a public league, on Yahoo, you log in 30 minutes before you draft, and that's where you find out where you're going to be selecting. So kind of around the room here, we're going to start with you, South, being number 1 overall. You open your draft lobby, and there you are, South 776, number 1 overall. So where's your brain? Where are you starting to think where your draft's going to go?
Yeah, I'm not even thinking about my first pick anymore at this point, because you should have a feeling going in, if you're number 1, exactly what you're going to do at number 1. If you don't, then you got bigger problems. So I'm already thinking about the way back around, talking about pick number 20 and 21. What is going to potentially be available to me there? I'm hoping that somewhere along the way, something a little screwy might happen where a guy that I like is going to fall to me in that spot where he really had no business being there. I'm just trying to develop a plan. Do I want to go with a running back for sure in that spot? Or if these 2 wide receivers slide there, those are the guys that I would consider taking over, these players. So I'm really more focused on my 2nd and 3rd pick than I am on my 1st, because Neil with 2 E's, Bill, big Bears fan, they can't affect anything I'm doing at number 1.
Right.
Especially Neil with 2 E's.
No.
Right. All right, Deal. How about you?
Who
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah,
well,
I was just saying, move along.
All right. So, Deal. How about you? Kind of the upper end of the middle here, drafting 4th out of 10. Where's your head going to be at?
I said last week, no matter where I'm drafting, no matter how many people are in my league, 3-4 is my favorite place. I like 4 a lot in the past 2 or 3 years, because since we made this switch where people love wide receivers for some weird reason, I can almost guarantee that in every league that I draft 4, I'm going to get one of my top 3 running backs and still get that early pick coming back through. So I love that. I love that I'm almost a lock to get Ezekiel Elliott or to get Le'Veon Bell. So I love that spot and to get that early pick. And I like the middle just because I don't have to wait quite as long. At least it feels that way.
All right, Rock at 7, kind of the back end. Where's your head?
I said last week, I prefer to draft in the back end of the draft. I mean, unless you can get your guaranteed number 1 guy like South, I prefer to be on the back end. I like watching how everything falls to me and then rolling with that, too quick pick combination. I would prefer to be closer to the end, but 7 doesn't bother me too much, especially in a league like this where you have, 3 or 4 stud wide receivers, you have 3 or 4 stud running backs. You're going to leave the top 7 picks with at least one superstar type player, and possibly 2 because you're picking earlier in the second round. So, at number 1 and number 20, you might not get that second superstar, but at 7, you have a little bit better chance to get those 2 superstar players.
Yeah, and then for me at 10, I know that, I've been doing this for a long time, and it feels almost like when you open that lobby, there's a little bit of disappointment initially when you are at the tail end of the draft. It's like I've been studying all off season, and like the more you look at things, the more you naturally fall in love with David Johnson, because how couldn't you? Not only am I obviously not going to get him, there's a small chance I'm even going to have firepower to trade for him. So it's almost like you're assigning there's no way I'm getting my top player this year. But that being said, I actually really like the back end this year. And the reason is, in my mind, there are 11 elite players in fantasy football this year. And it just so happens in a 10-team league, if you're drafting last, you're the only team that's getting 2 of those players. So I think I kind of like that. I'm less married to the running back crazy than I've ever been. I've been pretty clear about that the last few weeks. So for me, I'm not thinking positionally at all, because I think that's kind of a way you can sink yourself at the back end of a draft where, if the 7 running backs go in this first round, I'm not going to take 2 just because I like the position. So when I open a lobby and I see that I'm last, I kind of don't pay attention for a while, and I'm going to let you guys kind of pick your players and see what falls to me. But I do really love, I'm being as honest as possible, the top 5 running backs and the top 6 receivers. I'm going to draft 2 of those players. You see that. Again, it's a little different if you know the players in your league, which obviously we know each other and that's it in here. But if I could guess where the runs are going to go, then I might reach a little bit more. But kind of just at the end of the draft, take what comes to you. And I think more than anything, don't be disappointed. Don't go on tilt. Good things can still happen for you. So all that being said, we're now in the lobby. We've got 1:30 left. One more thing to discuss before we kick this thing off. I just said we know each other and we don't know the other 6 guys at all. How does it change the way you draft in that versus, in 3 weeks, we're going to draft our league where we know everybody and most of us have been playing together for a solid decade in the same league. How does that change your early drafting?
I was going to make mention of that, Miles. I think that's huge. Like when you know your league and you know what the other 8 guys are going to do. We talk all the time about our league, how we know certain guys fall in love with quarterbacks early or like receivers more than running backs or running backs more than receivers. When you that, when you have to draft certain players. You say all the time how you love to really pick right before me so you can handcuff me because you're going to own me at that point. Well,
right.
You own everybody that you play with because South doesn't like to pick Cowboys and Deal's going to pick 2 running backs. So you can really judge your draft based off of knowing what the other guys in your group are going to do.
Rocco, are you concerned that right after you, Jesus is drafting?
I'm a little concerned that Jesus is going to mess up my whole draft. I'm not going to lie to you.
Do you think he's going to take David Johnson at 8?
If anybody could, Jesus could.
Okay, just checking if we're on the same page here.
All right, so we're about to start this off. If you're live on YouTube, Deal is screen sharing, so you can follow along, know who's available, know who's getting killed. I'm going to narrate this thing to a point. I don't want to bore you just reading off names, but South, you are on the clock. And There you go.
Just went ahead and took David Johnson. Clear cut to me. He's the best player in fantasy football for 2017. So it's a no-brainer to me at number 1.
All right, number 2 went Le'Veon Bell. And here's kind of a turning point of a lot of drafts. If this third player is going to take Zeke with the chance that he's suspended.
Oh, no.
Receiver. And there he goes. So 3 running backs go 1, 2, 3, putting Deal on the clock.
I thought I was pretty clear that he wasn't supposed to do that.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. He should have really jumped on that YouTube live a couple seconds sooner there. Would have been beneficial for him. So this is where you need to make a decision. Decision's easy for me. I'm taking I'm taking LaShawn McCoy. He's my clear-cut number 4. He and Melvin Gordon are close for me, but he's still my number 4 guy. And I plan on getting one of my top 3, but getting number 4 is still not bad for me.
All right, so at 5, we had Antonio Brown go. Number 6 on the clock here. Top 3 players available, according to Yahoo, are receivers. We'll see what Desmond wants to do before we put Rocco on the clock here. And that was Julio Jones.
All right, so actually I thought he was going to go Odell there, leaving me with Julio Jones. I've been adamant saying I want to take a running back, but if it falls to this way in a 10-team league, you got to take the absolute guarantee, and Odell Beckham is an absolute guarantee.
All right, so that does put Jesus on the clock.
South. Sorry, man. He's going to get David Johnson.
He's going to swipe him.
It's possible.
Who are you going to go back to?
Oh, I don't even know at this point.
So for me, drafting 10th here, I'm sky high on Melvin Gordon.
Wow.
Jordy Nelson just went 8th, and this guy's name is Big Bears fan, so I'm really crossing my fingers about Jordan Howard. But I don't think this could have gone much better for me because Gordon's a possibility, but worst case scenario here, I really do like going one running back, one receiver. That way I don't get myself pigeonholed later in the draft to have to reach for a position. And I love some of these receivers that are left. Now, Melvin Gordon did just go, so this guy's not as big a Bears fan as he thought he was. But at this point here, I know what I just said about one of each position, but it's really difficult for me to pass up kind of securing my receiver position entirely here. I'm going to go ahead and take the turn and go with Mike Evans and AJ Green here.
Yikes. I hated it.
At that, yeah, I'm sure you weren't in love there, but I think at that point, you can go for Howard. I'm not sure about him as a sophomore. Ajayi, kind of same thing, second year as a star position. I've really thought about Devonta Freeman, but I think right here I can almost ignore receiver for quite a while and still outscore most of the teams in the league at that position. So Bears fan loves me because I left him Jordan Howard. So now he's got his buddy from Chicago. So Jesus back on the clock. Probably still going to try for David Johnson. What do you guys think?
Good chance. Yeah, I think it is worth noting that Jesus did take Jordy Nelson ahead of Mike Evans. It might be worth writing that down.
Yeah, he knows something. Oh, you know what it is? He's a Packers fan because he just took Aaron Rodgers 13th.
Wow.
Yes.
Jesus
Okay.
loves the Packers.
Jesus loves the Packers. So Rocco's on the clock here.
Here's a great example of trust your own rankings. Okay. I'm going to do this quick because I'm going to run out of time here, but I personally have Devonta Freeman ranked ahead of Jay Ajayi, and that's a guy that I would have targeted with my first round pick, depending on how everything falls. Like I know our league more than the running backs that went are going to go. So to get him in the second round to me is a slam dunk. It's 5 picks later than I thought I would have had to have taken him. So.
All right, so we miss Thomas and Ajayi putting Deal on the clock here. Who are you going to pair with Shady McCoy?
So this is similar to Rocco, where I'm going to trust my rankings versus everybody else probably in the world. And Todd Gurley's down on the list a little bit, so there's a chance you could wait on him. But if there's a guy you have ranked ahead of everybody else, it's not worth waiting just in case he might make it back to you. Get the guy that you have ranked ahead because apparently you ranked him ahead for a reason.
Right. Yeah, I think across the room we're pretty big on that strategy. All right, so DeMarco and Fournette go south 20 and 21. Let's make the turn with David Johnson here.
Yeah, so this is an interesting conundrum here because I was hoping by the way things were falling that one of those other backs was going to fall to me. At this point, they didn't. So I'm going to take all of the upside of T.Y. Hilton here just to get a wide receiver. And then I'm going to actually do the same exact thing that Deal just mentioned about a guy that you have higher on your board. Now, obviously, Lamar Miller's there. A couple guys might have Crowell ranked a little lower. I love him right here as a third rounder. I know it's early in the third round, but to me, I think that you're going to be able to cash in big time on him this year.
Yeah, I really like that turn, but I find it interesting that you took Hilton over Dez after arguing for Dez for about 10 minutes the other pod.
Yeah. Hashtag
you're right.
I guess we
ignore
made him
everything
be
Sal
right.
says.
No, what it comes down to is I do think Dez has a really high ceiling, but I think Ty has the better floor.
Yeah, it's definitely true. All right, so Dez and Cooper go off the clock. So Deal is up here. 2 running backs down. Where are you going?
Sorry, I'm just checking my rankings here, and I got to take a wide receiver, and I love Doug Baldwin. I love his upside. I love that he's been a sure thing there the last couple of years in Seattle. They're throwing the ball more, and I saw Cheeseburger ready today, and he actually looked trimmed down. I texted you guys and told you that. So I think their running is going to be a little more efficient there with him and Procise, and which in turn is good for their running backs, but it's also good for their passing game. They got to play the running game more than they did last year. It's great for Russell, great for Doug Baldwin.
Yeah, I think it's important to note here that I forgot to say this earlier. We're big fans of multi-quarterback. We're big fans of PPR. We're big fans of flex. But in all fairness, to make this thing as even as possible, since the other 6 owners don't know we like those things, we are drafting this as a standard scoring and roster league. So I think, Deal, you'd have been a fan of another running back there.
Yeah,
were we drafting flex?
Right. Yes, if I was drafting flex, no question, I would have taken Lamar Miller because I love him. He went right after me, but yeah, in the standard league, I'm going to take a receiver there.
I'm going to go ahead and draft Christian McCaffrey right now. I got to do it quick because time's running out. I'll give you the explanation now. Obviously, he's the next ranked running back for me. It's a position of need that I still have open here. I like the depth at wide receiver that's about to come to me in the 4th round to pair with Odell. So I figured take the running back now. And that's in terms of volume, you know, McCaffrey and Freeman is a nice little chunk there. So.
Yeah, all right. So we've missed a couple of Texans going in between Deal and Rocco with Lamar Miller and DeAndre Hopkins. Gronk goes at 28. What do you guys think? End of the 3rd round for a tight end there. Put our biases of hating tight ends aside. Is that decent value for Gronk for people who care about tight end?
I think absolutely. Like I said last time, you're starting to get in that range with the Brandon Cooks and Demaryius Thomas. Demaryius Thomas seems to be more a sure thing, but the rest of these guys on the list, Terrell Pryor, Sammy Watkins, never healthy. Alshon Jeffrey, never healthy. Allen Robinson still has Blake Bortles throwing him the ball. So there's lots of question marks. Gronk's a question mark too with his health, but worth the value there, I think.
All right, so at this point, I'm on the clock here. Brandon Cooks goes. I'm going to fight conventional wisdom and Deal on this one, and I'm going to continue to ignore the running back position.
Sounds terrible.
Just because I want to show you what can happen later in this draft. So I'm going to secure receiver here with Demaryius Thomas. And then Wild Predictions podcast is coming in a couple weeks. Peyton Manning used to hold the touchdown passing record in a single season with 55. After 2017, Tom Brady's going to break that. So I'm going to go ahead and take him at the top of the 4th round and laugh all the way to the bank when he throws 56 touchdown passes this year. So at this point, I'm terrified because I have 0 running backs. But I think I'm so far ahead of everybody else with Brady, Evans, Green, and Demaryius that I can make up that ground a little bit later. We'll see what happens.
It's an interesting strategy for sure.
It's very interesting.
You know, if you couldn't be set up more perfect to make it try and work. It's just a matter of whether or not you get the guys that you want to make it work.
Yeah, and I think at this point, what's great is, you know, since this isn't a real draft, I can kind of tell you where my brain is. I'm going to take running backs the next 4 to 5 picks. So at this point, it's not quite 0 RB where I'm totally ignoring the position, but I am resigned to the fact that I'm going to do a lot of streaming unless I just happen to find a guy that, you know, surpasses his value by quite a bit. So. All right, so Kelsey and Marshawn Lynch go off the clock. Rocco back on the clock here. You're sitting pretty nice here with Odell and 2 running backs. Where are you going now?
I'm going back to the old strategy that I said originally. Trust your rankings. And I know this is true for all of us. All of us have Allen Robinson rated a little bit higher than Alshon Jeffrey, Sammy Watkins, Terrell Pryor. That's the pick I'm going to go with. I'm going to add to my combination of Odell. 2 years ago, Allen Robinson was a double-digit touchdown guy. You're going to hope that he gets back to that, and you're not trusting him to be your number 1 receiver. He's already coming in, and you're relying on him for wide receiver 2 stats at this point, So, that's the way I see it. So Robinson's the pick there. People are going to get real tired of hearing us say trust your rankings.
I'm really tired of you drafting Jaguars.
Yeah.
I drafted one Jaguar.
So far.
All right. Joe Mixon off the board there to good old Desmond here. Thoughts on Joe Mixon? I'm just not sure about Joe Mixon.
I think he's going to have every opportunity in that offense from what I'm reading. They like him as a 3-down threat, and they're not sold on anything they had. So
right.
Whether it's injuries or just inconsistency. So he's going to have every opportunity to pick up the volume. So we all think the talent is there. It's just a matter of whether or not it plays out.
All right, Deal. Go ahead and explain what you just did.
Yeah, I just took Andrew Luck. I have a couple wide receivers that I really like, 2 or 3 wide receivers that I really like that I could have taken, but they're a little further down on the standard rankings that a lot of people use, and as well as kind of the rankings across the board. So I think I might be able to get at least one of them later. And knowing that South had back-to-back picks there, I don't feel like Luck would have made it back to me, where I feel like one of these receivers will. So,
yeah, you're right. Luck was not going to make it back to you. And this is early for me for a quarterback. But honestly, I want to win this competition that we're going to put out there to our listeners. So I am going to take a quarterback here. I'm going to take Drew Brees with this pick. Always high volume, always high point output in fantasy. So I love that. And then I'm going to take a guy who I've made I haven't hit at all how much I love him. I'm taking Devontae Adams here. Kind of like Rocco said about a guy in Allen Robinson who could give you wide receiver 1 production as your wide receiver 2. I feel like Adams is right there. He's only getting better every year. So sign me up for that.
Worth mentioning, too, that I thought you would have taken Luck. That's why I took him there. And then Devontae Adams and Jarvis Landry were my 2 guys. So I thought you would probably take one of them as well as a quarterback. So that goes with what Miles has really harped on, that you got to know your league.
Right.
Yeah, I think something else I'm noticing on the YouTube broadcast here as Deal's screen sharing is take advantage of that queue. That thing's set up. I mean, these sites don't put tools like that in there just to waste their coding. Take advantage of that so you can remember who you've wanted, who you've had your eye on. So, Deal, you just took a guy that you just talked about.
Yeah, I took Jarvis Landry, and I actually forgot that my queue was visible for you guys. So South, knock it off. Don't be looking at my queue.
I've been watching you load guys in there for a couple minutes now.
But yeah, Jarvis Landry, very valuable in PPR, but he's shown the last 2 years, 1,100 yards back to back. I think he's going to put up more than 4 touchdowns this season, along with his 1,100 standard yards. I think he's more for a 1,200-yard year with at least 6, maybe 7 or 8 touchdowns. So I like him a lot, standard or PPR.
All right, so I don't love the running backs right here, but I do love a couple of these wide receivers that are coming up, and I'm going to jump in and take one of them right now, guy I'm very high on, Keenan Allen.
Well, that would have been nice, but time ran out and you took Martavis Bryant.
Well, Deal's talking too long, so
just make your pick.
Yeah, his talking doesn't matter. Right? So, but I think worth mentioning that Martavis Bryant, certainly not a bad pick at this point right now.
Not a bad pick. And I mean, technically, Yahoo has Martavis ranked higher than Keenan. I personally have Keenan ranked higher than Martavis. That's why I would have went that way. But that also would it did fill out my receiver pick. So Yahoo gave me their higher ranked guy. I'm not going to cry about it, but I will blame Deal later for that.
All right, so I'm on the clock here with 2 straight picks, and I said before I was going to be taking some running backs. I really love what happened to the running back board here. Like I've said for weeks now, this middle tier of running backs I'm in love with. I kind of was leaning this way before an injury to Devontae Booker. I like C.J. Anderson out in Denver. They said he looks slimmed down. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I'm not going to be banking on him like crazy. He's going to part of a rotation for me, so I like that. And then I'm going to take my upside pick here. I said last season in a wild prediction that there were going to be 6 players over 2,000 all-purpose yards, and one of those players, before I even knew where he was going to be, was Dalvin Cook. Nothing about where he was drafted slows that down for me. Latavius Murray scares me about zero. So I'm thrilled to death to be getting Dalvin Cook here in the 6th round. So C.J. Anderson, Dalvin Cook, part of a rotation for me. I think you could have worse starts.
Yeah, and it's important too to know what's going on injury-wise before you go in, because if you paid attention the last few days, you would know that Latavius is already at risk of even starting the season. So there's a chance that Cook never gives him an opportunity to fight for that job.
Yeah, he certainly has that skill set where he'll just never let it go. 1-2 weeks where Cook's killing it, and that's that. All right, Rocco, your full 30 seconds. Go ahead. We don't want you to mess up again.
Yeah, that's fine. One guy that I know we're all really high on right now.
I won't even talk here.
You just talked. One guy I'm really high on right now. In the throat. One guy I'm really high on right here is LeGarrette Blount. I know the rest of the group is too. I'm going to be the first one to take some bench depth here at running back, and stash him away just in case you need him, just in case, running the risk of starting a rookie every week doesn't bode well for you, even though I think McCaffrey's a slam dunk. So just take your chances where you can take them. I think that's a really good – this is the time of the draft where you start taking depth over quote-unquote starters.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to learn. We kind of picked on you in this exercise last year. And I know after talking about it, it was just kind of more something that came out of your mouth without really being your way of thought. But last year at this point, you took a tight end because you said you wanted to fill out your starters. And I kind of jumped in on you. That's a lot of people's mindset. And I think that's a horrible mindset when it comes to fantasy, where you're unwilling to take a bench player over a starter. Well, Rocco just took a guy with 18 touchdown upside over a tight end, and I think that's to be applauded. All right, we missed a deal pick. Deal, tell us what you did there.
Yeah, we missed it because Rocco wouldn't shut his big yapper.
You interrupted me 3 times.
So I took Adrian Peterson. I didn't need another running back per se. I have 2 guys that do have some problems with their ACLs and such, and Shady and Todd, but I took AP in the event that he takes off like he possibly could, like AP does. So just for his upside, and I like having that depth at running back.
All right, South, back-to-back here. Tell us what you got going on.
Yeah, I went and took Ty Montgomery. I noticed that my last turn he was on the board, and I thought to myself, I'm going to end up passing on him for now. And I didn't think he was going to get back to me. He did, so I'm thrilled about that. I think he's going to have a much more expanded role in that offense. He's a dual threat. He's going to bank a ton of points. And then I grabbed Larry Fitzgerald in hopes that you're going to get one more, at least, wide receiver 3, possibly wide receiver 2 production season out of him as a guy who's hungry to win.
Important to note that somebody just drafted a kicker at 63rd.
I was going to give Deal a chance to talk. I'm actually a fan of Justin Tucker before that typical last round. I would take him not even second, like the 13th round here. I'd be okay with that, but 7th is ridiculous.
So I took Kelvin Benjamin. I was high on him last year. He kind of took off pretty hot at the beginning of the season, and then I traded him away just in time to get Aaron Rodgers. But I am higher on him this year. I've heard rumors that he slimmed down a lot, which would be great for him, but also that his strength is up, his speed is up, and I expect Cam to be better this season. So I expect Kelvin to be a big part of that.
Rock, go ahead.
This is a spot where I think we're going to start seeing some quarterbacks come off the board. In the last couple of picks, we saw Wilson, we saw Ryan. I took a guy that I'm extremely high on. I actually would probably put him in the same grouping with Wilson as we talked about during our QB podcast. That's Jameis Winston.
Yeah, it's a good pick, and I think you were the guy here without the quarterback, and since your last pick, we saw Mariota, Wilson, and Ryan go. Mentally, is that kind of what forced you to go Winston there?
Well, Winston's a guy that I was keeping my eye on anyway. He's a guy that I've targeted, I've wanted to own, and it's just a matter of knowing when you have to draft him. There's a good chance that he probably wouldn't have made it back to me. I know you love him, and if any of these other guys got scared off by the run, then I miss out on my quarterback.
Yeah, and that's how you
have to look at it.
There was one guy that didn't have a quarterback, so that's 2 picks. You got to hope he doesn't take your guy, so that's a little bit scary. I'm up here. I'm gonna go back-to-back running backs again. I love Tevin Coleman here. I was really scared off by his ADP earlier this offseason, but I mean, to get him in what's last pick of the 7th round here, I'm thrilled to death. Devontae Freeman's certainly not an injury-prone player, but he's that guy that if he goes down, Tevin Coleman's a top 5 back. So I'm pumped there. And then a guy I have a special spot for this year is Amir Abdullah in Detroit. He's been frustrating at this point due to injuries, but all the talent in the world, fast track in Detroit. So I like my chances of stealing one there. Again, I'm just trying to bolster this rotation of running backs I've got. Anderson, Cook, Coleman, and Abdullah. I'm feeling pretty decent about that. All right, so defense is coming off the board here with Denver and Seattle, and it's important to note that some of our users have left, so a little bit of bot picking here, but a little too early for defenses. Are we agreed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think we would have that if they weren't jumping in and out of the draft. So,
right. All right, so Rocco, you're up here.
One guy I love, but in a PPR only league, would be a guy like Bilal Powell. He would give me great depth at the running back spot, but I don't love him in a standard scoring league just because he doesn't get enough rushing attempts and touches. In a share situation with Matt Forte. So I'm going to go with a guy who should see a lot of touches, and that's Dante Moncrief. Even with the news that Luck is injured right now and possibly might not start the season, as soon as Luck gets back, he will target Moncrief, and that will benefit me greatly. That's also my second bench receiver, so it's just more depth to add onto the roster rather than taking a tight end who's going to give you similar production to every other tight end that's being drafted in this series of tight ends right now.
Right.
I took Deshaun Jackson there, my pick. He's another guy that he didn't have a bad season last year, had 1,005 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, but I expect him to have a much better season this year with Jameis. Similar, all the things Rocco said, Jameis is just ascending, and it's going to be a great thing for Mike Evans, but I also expect Deshaun Jackson to have a great season.
All right, so we have Ben Roethlisberger, Arizona defense. South, you're up on your turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, so with my first pick at number 80, I went ahead and took Eddie Lacy. If you can get a guy at number 80 who is typically going in the top 40, I realize that there's some potential issues there, some things to be scared about, but I'm on board at number 80 overall, especially as a guy who is my 4th running back. And then I'm going to draft Golden Tate. I do think he's going to have a good year this year, especially as a wide receiver who is right now my 4th wide receiver. I think last year his start was a little bit of an anomaly. He'll be more productive, more consistent throughout the season.
Yeah, I really love that turn for you. I mean, I know it's not PPR, so Tate's a little bit damaged there for his value, but I really like both those players. All right, Deal, what's your thoughts here? 15 seconds left on the clock.
Back to me, and I'm tempted to take a receiver here, but I love getting some more running back depth, especially where I don't really need it at the beginning of the season. I have LaShawn McCoy, I have Todd Gurley, I have AP, and I love Doug Martin to come back from being suspended, have a great season. We've talked in depth about how he plays so much better when he has something to prove. When he has something big to prove, like he wants to stay in the NFL. So I expect him to have a good season this year, bouncing back. Some of you have kind of alluded to him being traded or cut. No matter where he goes, I think he's going to have a good season when he comes back from his suspension.
Yep. All right, couple more kickers off the board. Rocco on the clock.
Yep. This is a spot where I am going to, quote unquote, fill my roster. I waited and waited and waited, and this is a guy that I'm extremely high on, Martellus Bennett. I think this is a good spot to take your tight end finally. We're in the 10th round. We have depth all over, and he's still sitting there. And if you have him ranked higher than the other tight ends, you're glad that he fell to you in the 10th because you didn't have to reach for him like you did for Gronkowski in the 3rd or Greg Olsen or Kelsey in the 5th.
All right, I'm going to go one more running back here, and at this point, I'm going pure upside at the running back position. There's some guys, ADPs are a little bit higher than where I'm headed here, but at this point, as my 5th running back, I'm going to hope that I can get a Jordan Howard situation where a guy's going to take over a backfield. I'm going with Washington's Samaje Perine here at the turn, banking on the fact that by the time I need to play him, he's going to be taking over that backfield because there's really nothing special about Fat Rob. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my tight end to not risk losing a guy who I think in the 10th round, I got a top 5 tight end, a.k.a. number 1 tight end, a.k.a. Mr. Body Issue from ESPN, Zach Ertz.
You're the
It's a lot of
worst.
AKAs.
You're the worst kind of person.
All right, so I've grabbed Ertz. That kind of filled out my starters as well. Spencer Ware finally goes, and I think if you actually look at kind of what's available with Spencer Ware, Mark Ingram, Frank Gore, these are the type of backs that what are your feelings on those guys where you're taking the starter early in the year that could lose his value?
I think it's not a bad situation if you're doing it. We're talking about in the picks in the 90s right now, because if for some reason they pan out like they hopefully should, then you look like a genius for where you got them. And if they don't, then it's no big deal because you already have 3 or 4 guys at that spot.
Now, Rocco, you just took Danny Woodhead in a standard league. How do you feel now?
Here's how I feel. As much as you're not going to get his receptions, the injury to Kenneth Dixon really makes me think that they could use him in a more versatile role, more rushing attempts, more yards passing. We already know that Baltimore threw the ball a ton last year because Deal never lets us forget it. So if he was just their number 2 back and Dixon was there, I wouldn't look at Woodhead in their standard. But I'm moving him up my boards a little bit lately with the injury to Kenneth Dixon.
Deal just took the player you should have taken. Deal, tell us about Paul Perkins.
I took Paul Perkins. I like Paul Perkins a lot. I watched him lots and lots of highlights of him. And the games when they actually gave him the ball last year, only one game they gave him 20 touches last year, and he dominated. And Shane Vereen is not competition. So he has no competition back there. He is a very good receiving back. And we know that Eli likes to throw the ball, but he's also a very good runner. So I love him this late at 97.
Yeah, it's a good spot. All right, South, your turn.
Yep, pick number 100 in this draft. I went ahead and grabbed Pierre Garçon. He is the as bona fide number 1 as you can be on the 49ers, but he should get a high majority of targets. He should, it's not a PPR, obviously, so that'll hurt a little bit, but I like his chances to put up some points as a number 5 wide receiver. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my tight end here, and I'm taking Kyle Rudolph. Again, he's more valuable in a PPR, but they love him in the red zone in Minnesota. So he's probably going to score quite a few touchdowns among tight ends. So, and to get him at 101, I'll take that.
Yeah, I think we're kind of proving what we talked about last week where, tight end early is what it is, but we all waited. And as of right now, we have Ertz, we have Rudolph, we have Martellus Bennett, and Deal hasn't even taken one yet. But I don't think we're giving up nearly as much to those guys that took Kelsey and Gronk and Olsen rounds ago, especially the Jordan Reed one. Dude is already hurt. So, wait on those tight ends, man.
So this is a good spot where it would be good for me to take a tight end because I don't have one yet. But if I go ahead and look at where it says position drafted grid, everybody has one except for me, and it's probably going to be a while till somebody takes a backup tight end. So I'm going to get another receiver for depth here.
I'm upset.
I got Jeremy Maclin, who I love to have a big year this year. He only had 536 yards, being injured last year, and having Alex Smith throwing him the ball. Joe Flacco has a big arm, which is a benefit for Maclin, as well as Rocco covered, and maybe who he should have taken. They throw the ball a lot, so he's going to be a beneficiary.
All right, so Cam Meredith goes, Kirk Cousins goes, Rocco back on the clock here.
All right, so I'm going to just continue to add depth, especially because I think it's important for that third wide receiver spot for you to have an array of options. I'm going to go with a guy that I talked about earlier this year. I was thinking here, and that's Corey Coleman from the Cleveland Browns. I like for him to be their number 1 receiver, and I like for him to really step it up big this season.
Huh. No, it's certainly a player I would target. I'm such a big fan of 2 of the other receivers on the board at this point. But it just, this is the point in a draft where you're going to disagree a lot.
Yeah,
because
it's
of those
all personal
you know.
rankings at this point.
Right.
This is where your personal rankings really come into play, because if you just go straight and read off the list, you're gonna take guys that you don't necessarily believe in. So
Right.
that's why having your own rankings is so huge. I'm not high on Eric Decker. I'm not high on Stephon Diggs. I'm higher on Coleman. So that's where you go.
So I'm sky high on Stephon Diggs. So now he's on my team. I think he's a situation where another year with Sam. This kind of hurts to say, but I think Minnesota's passing game's actually going to take kind of leaps here this year. So I kind of like what they've done here. And then for my second pick, I'm going to take another shot at receiver, and I'm going to be the John Brown sucker. He was hampered by injuries last year. And when you have those speed guys that are hampered by injuries, that's a real problem. It's not like trying to slow down Brandon Marshall. He was never speedy anyways. But you slow down John Brown, you slow down Deshaun Jackson, you take away what they're good at. So now he's healthy. He still has a coach that loves to air it out. He as much as we don't like Palmer, he still loves to air it out. So I like my chances of catching a little fire there late in the draft with John Brown.
All right, so
all right, Rocco, back on the clock here.
I'm back on the clock here. A couple of picks went there. This is the spot where I love to take my second quarterback. Insurance, just in case I still have a top, 15 guy. The guy I'm going with is Matthew Stafford at this point. He's not the highest ranked guy. Dak's ahead of him, Andy's ahead of him, but I personally have Stafford ahead of those other two. So that's where you go. Make sure that even though I love Jameis and I trust Jameis, one, you have a bye week, and two, if something happens, you want the security of knowing that your season is not lost. So I've always said, if you don't take the top quarterback, make sure you're one of the first to get a backup.
All right, so I'm back on the board. I'm going to take another running back because you can never have too many, and I'm going to take Jonathan Stewart here. I love having another starting running back who we don't really know what's going to happen yet down there in Carolina. They've alluded to playing McCaffrey in a slot or splitting completely, but as of now, Jonathan Stewart had a pretty good season last year, 9 rushing touchdowns, and he's slotted as the starter. So if you're getting a number 1 running back at 117, it's pretty good value.
All right, so at this point here, not to kind of step on South's toes, I think we can kind of stop just going pick by pick for you guys. Let's talk a little bit about our teams. How are you guys feeling right now?
Actually, this is a good segue because I'm coming up on the clock here where I'm going to actually delve into areas where you don't typically have to at this point. I'm going to take a defense here because I like the depth that I have on my bench, and I've identified guys in my rankings that I like that I don't think anybody's going to touch in this turn. So that allows me to go ahead and take a defense that's a little bit higher rated. And I'm going to follow Rocco's suit here, and just because I think he's going to have a bigger year than people are giving him credit for, I'm taking Carson Wentz as my second quarterback. With Drew Brees, you're not really going to have to think about playing him other than one time. So, but if he gets hot somehow, then you can consider it. But overall, I feel like I'm in a good position here where my last player, I could really take a chance on somebody. And that's a good place to be when you like the rest of your team.
Right. Are there spots on your roster where you feel like are going to either propel you to a championship here in this fake league or maybe can hold you back from?
I think probably my running back position could, because I have some question marks there. After David Johnson, we all think Isaiah Crowell is going to be really good. So I'm comfortable with him there. But if the Browns brown again, you're in trouble. If Eddie Lacy and he getting in shape and getting on a little bit of a better situation for him doesn't pan out, then you could be in trouble there. Ty Montgomery, it's more of a PPR play in a lot of cases, but I do think from everything you're hearing, he's going to get increased volume this year. So, but again, it's another chance that you're taking. So I'm taking some chances at that spot, and it could pay out big, or I could look like a fool.
So often something like that happens, huh?
Yep.
How about you, Deal? Things you love, things you're not crazy about?
I really like my team a lot, actually, and I generally do. And I've said before, it's
if you don't like your team, What are you
something
doing?
mistakes were made, right? So,
Exactly.
so I'll let you go ahead and mention who you're going to draft here, and then
Well,
I'll jump
I
back
just
on.
similar to deal or to what South said. I like a guy late that I'm going to take that I don't think is getting touched. So I'm going to take my kicker and my defense here in my second and third to last pick. I went with Sebastian Janikowski because he can kick it over them their mountains. And I took the Rams defense because Aaron Donald's really, really good. Now, and this is kind of I was going to say this before. In a real league where Autobots are not selecting kickers 9 rounds ago, my 12th, 13th pick, I have zero issue taking Justin Tucker. I think that guy's such a weapon. It's ridiculous. And it's kind of like that Gronk in the first thing where you're going to be so far ahead of everybody in kicker. I know how much some of you love kicker, but the point is you're going to be way ahead. And that's the point, positionally, to be ahead of other people. So don't be afraid to take Justin Tucker early. But go ahead, Deal. Talk about your squad.
Yeah, I like my squad, but I was mentioning that it's worth saying that you should like your squad because you followed your own rankings. Don't go off these standard rankings that Yahoo or ESPN or whoever else put out there. Follow your own rankings because in the end, at least you're going to like your team. So I think that's worth mentioning. So I'm going to go ahead and take a defense here. I'm going to take Oakland. And similar to you, Khalil Mack's really good. So that's why I took him there. But I obviously I love Andrew Luck. I love the upside at my wide receiver position, but my floor is also really high with Jarvis and Doug Baldwin. Kelvin Benjamin, floor not quite as high, but ceiling sky high. And then I love my running back position with Shady and Gurley, followed up by AP, Doug Martin, Paul Perkins. So I love my team.
Rocco, how you feeling, man?
Other than the fact that Martavius Bryant should be Keenan Allen, I'm doing great. It's not a draft that I normally would have done. I don't think any of my teams to this point have really looked this way. But once again, we said watch how it falls to you. I'm stronger at receiver than I've been in past mock drafts. I still like my running backs enough. I think that they're both going to be high volume guys. I don't agree with what Deal said about Jonathan Stewart. I think he's as good as gone out of that offense. I think McCaffrey's going to be the workhorse back there. They might line him up in this slot, but that's for a play, and then he'll be back to running back. But yeah, overall, I'm a guy who I'm going to take the last kicker and probably stream kickers for the most part, to be honest with you, based on who has the best matchup. So I'm always going to leave that for last. I'm gonna take guys ahead and give myself the best depth possible to make a run at this thing.
All right, I guess that leaves me here. I do have one pick left. And personally, I think it's a steal. And Deal, you've talked about this guy before, and we've all given him a hard time before. I am going to take a backup quarterback, even though I have Tom Brady. And I do this when I take a top quarterback. All I do is when's Tom Brady's bye? Okay, week 9. NFL week 9 schedule. Who's playing a bad team? I think Cincinnati's going to be terrible this year. But I think they're going to be just good enough to keep Jacksonville throwing. And I'm going to take Blake Bortles with my last pick here. And, chuckle. Well, he's a top 10 fantasy quarterback every year.
Yep.
So, worst case scenario, the thing that would hold me back, obviously, is my running backs from winning a league where I do have 5 of them. And there's some upside there, but there's no guarantee at all. So at this point, if I have to move Tom Brady, which personally I like my players enough to think I won't, if I do have to move Tom Brady, I'm okay starting Blake Bortles if Brady can net me a stud running back. I took Diggs and John Brown. Neither one of them is going to see my lineup unless it's a bye week because Mike Evans, AJ Green, Demaryius Thomas, I dominate everybody in the league at receiver. I've been on record about Ertz before, but I think the running back position is hard to ignore. And I half did this mock on purpose to kind of show that. It's difficult if you're at 10 to wait until 50 to take a running back, but it is also a strategy. I think if you're good enough drafting depth-wise, you can handle. I do have 4 number 1 backs on my team, and I have Tevin Coleman, who plays on a pretty good offense and is going to be featured, and as we've said before, he gets his own points. So all in all, I don't feel too terrible about it. I don't think I'd win the league. Yahoo disagrees with me. They have me on top. They have Deal on the bottom, as they always do, because Deal doesn't draft backup quarterbacks.
That's right.
But based solely on points, Yahoo does have Team Miles on top, Team South 4th, Team Rocco 7th, and Team Deal 10th. Funny that we ended up in the same draft spots we are. But what we're going to do here for the listening public is post up those teams on the site, maybe on Facebook as well. And we'd love to hear your feedback on how we did. I mean, who kind of won this thing? Who's got the best team? Who would you roll with, knowing that it's standard? Any other crazy things, guys, words of advice that kind of came up in the mock there before we sign this thing off?
Yeah, I think I just want to reiterate, like when you're getting late in the draft there and you've identified guys, and don't be afraid to be laughed at a little bit. I think everybody's afraid to be that guy that people are thinking, oh man, what are you doing? If you know there's a player that you really like, you've researched it, you feel comfortable with it, and you're going to take them late, and you know really nobody else is going to jump on that, definitely bump up some of those other positions a little bit earlier. Take a kicker a little bit earlier than you might. Take a defense a little earlier than you might, because it's going to give you an edge in that area to help make up for taking a chance late. Like I took Jaquiz Rogers with my last pick, and that's a situation where he's going to start the season as their running back. Anytime that he's been a starter and had 15 or more carries a game, he's been absolutely buckets. Like he's just been dynamite. So there's a chance that given Doug Martin's past, he never gives that job back. But those are the chances that you have to be willing to take late and move those other positions up to make up for taking that chance.
Yeah, and I think we're not even talking about, and it's funny because, you know, Deal was the one that took Doug Martin because, and I loved your reasoning. I mean, Doug Martin's a stud when he wants to be. Right. And last year he ran for 2.9 yards per carry and struggled mightily when he was in. And Jaquiz Rogers looked pretty good. So, you know, it's a situation where if you're South, he took a guy in the 15th round that could steal a job from a guy you took. Now, what was it, about 10th or 11th? I don't have the draft in front of me. It's not like your first round pick, but those are the types of things I totally agree, South. This standard thinking of kicker defense should be your last two picks to a point. You know, I mean, listen, don't take a defense in the 10th round. Don't take your kicker in the 8th, as we saw here in this mock. But it kind of, you know, we say the same junk all the time. Don't get married to any idea. If you're sitting there and there's not, if the only guys you really love, and it's the 13th round, the only guys you really love, you know, no one's touching, like Jaquiz Rogers for South. Take Justin Tucker. You know, take Denver's defense. Have a situation where you don't have to hope, like I do in most leagues, most years. Every single week, I'm like, God, I hope there's a defense out there who's playing San Francisco, you know, because I don't trust, you know, I'm streaming Detroit and this week they're playing Green Bay. Well, I don't want to start them, you know. So if you can get a solid spot where you don't have to stream, then do it. You know, buck conventional wisdom from time to time, and it can really work out for you.
Right.
Any other thoughts out there?
Go ahead, yeah.
I think it's worth doing some mock drafts. We've said it a million times. Get online, computer, on your iPad, on your phone. It's so easy to do now. It's so accessible. There's no reason not to do it. And make your own rankings and do some mock drafts and find out where guys are falling to, because it does change pretty much daily. But find out where those ADPs are, where guys are trending to fall. It's different in every league, but you can at least see some trends and get some information that's going to be helpful on draft day.
Mm-hmm. And move around. You know, I mean, the big reason we picked the 4 draft spots we did was so that you could all get those 4 different viewpoints. You know, who's available for South is completely different than who's available for me at 2 ends of the draft. So as you're the mocker, move yourself. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to draft first every time I mock because then I know I get David Johnson every time. Well, good for you. But when your draft comes around and you lose the lottery and you're drafting 9th, now what do you do?
Right.
Cool. And it's, you owe it to yourself to do it. And if you just don't, I don't have the time, you know, that one took us like 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Well, there's sites out there like Fantasy Pros where you can do a mock in about 6 minutes. Their computer's fast, and you can actually edit it to your own league's settings. And they do a pretty decent job of changing the way the computer mocks. So there's places out there for you to do it. If you care enough, it will make a difference for you. You can go into the draft a lot more confident about what the heck's going to happen here.
Right.
You know, it doesn't give you guarantees, but put in the time. Rock, final thoughts?
I'm gonna pull a little bit of John Voight from Varsity Blues. Stick to the basics. Stick to your rankings. Stick to your rankings. Stick to your rankings. All right. Like Sal said, you might get laughed at by some of the guys in your draft, but if you feel that strongly, like I do, that a guy like CJ Prosise has a very good possibility of, eventually taking the job away from, Eddie Lacy, or at least multiple touches late in the season because he's more reliable, then that's going to pay off for you come week 14, week 15 when you're in the playoffs. So stick to your rankings, trust your gut, trust the research that you've done, and don't be afraid to be laughed at.
Yeah, because ultimately, we're on week 5 of giving you, dropping the knowledge on you from us. And you can go to any media source and get any number of opinions. Ultimately, no one knows anything.
No.
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of, I think, Rocco's ultimate point is just because Michael Fabiano gets paid to do this, and just because Matthew Berry's been listening to our podcast for a solid year and just blatantly copying the things that we say.
Stealing all my catchphrases.
A week after we say them, they all of a sudden are in his articles. He doesn't know what's going to happen in this football season any more than my 5-year-old son does. None of us know. You could take more calculated risks, or obviously the research helps you out. But David Johnson could break his leg 1 minute. Look at Tom Brady in 2008.
Right.
He coming off of 50 touchdowns, tears an ACL 8 minutes in.
Right.
Nobody saw that coming. So ultimately what we're saying is the more you mock, the more you trust your own rankings, you can kind of develop a system of what's most likely to happen for you. And I think that's kind of what's important to do. So, hey, we appreciated the questions coming in on YouTube Live. That was a good time here out of a couple of our listeners. And I'd like to get that going a little bit more on our social media sites as well. But, we're loving the interacting with you guys, the Goon Squad. It's been picking up lately, and it's just making this even more fun. It's given us the opportunity to, like I said, drop the knowledge on you, but also interact, and we're learning from you all as well. I don't think there's enough opinions out there, and I don't say that sarcastically. Sift through the ones you trust and the ones you don't. Hopefully you trust us. But with the close of the draft, then, that's going to do it for this edition, number 70 podcast. Hopefully you picked up a few pointers to either follow or completely ignore and be contrarian because you think we're stupid in order to help you refine your drive to your own championship. We'd love for you to go to footballgoons.com for more details, as well as all of our fantasy football rankings. They are continually being updated. We're going to have a pretty big update this week as we're going to change some of the players at the top end of our rankings. Check in early, check in often to get the jump on your league. Most leagues aren't drafting for a few weeks, so go ahead and make sure you put in that time. Keep up with us on social media, facebook.com/footballgoons, and on the Twitter @footballgoons. We want to hear from you. Send us any questions, comments, concerns, even about building fences for deal or raising brand new puppies for deal.
Dang it. Knock that crap off.
Basically whatever you want, and we'll get to answering. In the next few weeks here, we've got our predictions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the actual NFL coming up and what we see happening this season. But we will always continue to field your fantasy questions. I think we're going to go ahead and plug at least a portion of every podcast to still talk about your fantasy questions, because we know that's what's pressing for you. That's what's pressing for us as we move on and hopefully get all of you guys a trophy. And like one of us a trophy, not the other 3 of you down there. Basically just me. Hey, we appreciate your time. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.